So how do we determine what the correct shape of the horse's foot is? In this picture here, you can see a dark or blackened area on each side of the foot back in the quarters. And again, that's from that foot expanding and it's pulling on the white line, so the white line has actually got widened or stretched out in that area. But how do we know how much of that we can remove? Well, here's a bone out of that very same foot. Again, it's a cadaver leg. We didn't dissect the live horse. But you can see how much narrower in the shape of that bone is compared to the actual hoof capsule. So that really gives us an indication by doing lots of these dissections and understanding where the stretch and widening and flaring of the foot is occurring and how much we can remove. And I think more times than not, we probably end up leaving a little too much flare on the foot rather than collecting it and gathering it back up and making it strong and healthy. Something that has a bend to it is not going to be near as strong as something that has a nice straight vertical line to it. So it's really important to remove the flares of the foot. We used to think dressing the outside of the foot was a bad thing because that affected the ability of the horse's foot to maintain moisture. But now that we understand that the hoof capsule actually has straws or tubes that run vertically in the foot and the moisture travels up and down rather than side to side, we know that dressing and rasping on the outside of the horse's foot doesn't really harm it. And there are even protective coverings that you can put back on if you are concerned about that. Here's the picture of the top of a horse's foot. And again, we've pulled the hoof capsule off the laminae and the coffin bone here. And probably our best indication to determine what the shape of the foot should be from the top or from the dorsal surface is looking at the hairline, because that hairline will take on the shape of the coffin bone. And so we can use the shape of the hairline and make the bottom surface of the foot eccentric to it and try to make the shapes match. Here's a picture of a foot that as it gets longer it begins to flare and distort. You can see one side of the foot has a slight amount of flare to it, but the other side has quite a bit of flare to it. And so the position of the horse's bones relative to that hoof capsule in this case happened to be to the right side of the picture. Even though it's difficult to see there beyond the hairline, it's actually causing the foot more to flare to that side because of the unequal weight distribution. And that's pretty typical of a lot of horses. There aren't too many perfect horses in the world. In fact, I don't know that I've ever seen one. And so they're not always going to grow perfectly symmetrical, but we can adjust our trimming practices to try to strive as close to that as possible. And in some cases we do have to overcompensate. And the level of the horse and the frequency of the trimming and shoeing really plays a role in how much we can do. Here's the picture of a hoof capsule, again from a top or a dorsal view. This is a pretty typical hind foot. It has a very narrow or shovel pointed shape to it. When we apply to the shoe to the foot, we can actually use the shoe to fill in the voids of the foot, and we want to try to make that shoe as close to the shape of the white line on the bottom as we can, but when we view it from the top, we want that shoe to match the shape of the top of the hoof or the hairline, because the white line on the bottom and the hairline at the top are our two best indicators of what that bone inside that hoof capsule are shaped like. So the nice part about shoeing is whatever we cannot accomplish through the trimming, we can use the shoeing to fill in the areas that we're not able to gain through the trimming. Okay, this was another cadaver leg, and so now you can see once the hoof capsule has been removed that the shoe very closely is eccentric to the shape of the coffin bone. The only difference is obviously because the hoof capsule has been removed, the shoe is much larger than the shoe, but you can see that same pointed shape to the shoe that's we've attempted to match to the coffin bone.